Welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today for the May installment of our monthly virtual workshop series. My name is Drew Scammell, pronouns he, him, and I'm a program associate with the Inclusive STEM Ecosystems for Equity and Diversity, or ICE program, at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. On behalf of our AAAS IUS initiative, I'd like to welcome you to today's workshop, using artificial intelligence, AI, to enhance learning for all students. Today's workshop will feature presentations from Dr. Narges Norouzi and Dr. Ibukun Osunbunmi. Before we jump into the workshop, I have a few housekeeping notes I'd like to go through. So first and foremost, this presentation is being recorded, and that recording will be made available in the coming weeks on our website at AAAS-ius.org. And the slides are already posted and available on the website if you'd like to follow along. You'll also receive an email with a link to the recording when it's available, which will be in about a week or so. And please note, we will transition to a Q&A discussion breakouts following the presentations, and those breakout rooms will allow for deeper engagement with our two presenters and the facilitators that they brought along, and those breakout rooms will not be recorded. Additionally, we have closed captioning for this workshop. You can download and view the full transcript by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And for those of you who are new to the AAAS IUS initiative, this initiative seeks to support faculty, students, and the greater undergraduate STEM education community by disseminating research and knowledge about STEM teaching, learning, equity, and institutional transformation. We invite you to learn more about the AAAS IUS initiative on our website and hope you will join our community as future contributors. You can also follow us on X, or formerly Twitter, at IUS Program, and LinkedIn to stay up to date on our latest events, blogs, or to share what you've learned from today's workshop. And with that, that's all I got, and we'll hand to the main stars of today. So we'll shift over to the first presentation. I'd like to welcome Dr. Narges Norouzi, Assistant Teaching Professor at University of California, Berkeley. And over to you. I'll pull down my slides.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Wonderful. Okay, you have my screen, right? Okay, great. Thank you everyone for joining this session today. My name is Narges Norouzi, and I'm an assistant teaching professor in the Electrical Engineering and Computer Sciences Department at UC Berkeley. Today, my plan is to talk a little bit about the current shift in AI education with all the generative AI tools that we have at hand, and how it's changing the education landscape for both the students and educators as well. I will also briefly talk about the benefits and the challenges of deploying and using different generative AI tools in the classroom and in different disciplines. And then I'll close this session by talking about the future trends and where I would like to see the AI education taking us next. So when we talk about AI education and the recent shift in thinking about the importance of incorporating AI in education, that's basically started when we have all of these generative AI systems appearing and popping up that are basically automating and enhancing a lot of the user experiences and automating a lot of different tasks that we have. Like, we all know about DALL-E, we know about the different GPT versions, Claude, and just to name a few of them. But then all of these generative AI tools that we have at hand, they're impacting the students and educators. So in the next few slides, I'll go over what are the impacts and what are the different state-of-art ways that students and educators are using generative AI systems. And then I'll talk a little bit about how I think it's transforming education and where we're going with this next. So how our students and educators are using generative AI system or AI tools generally? We all know that the students are using AI systems to have them write essays for them or help them do different kinds of tasks that they have at hand. So in my discipline, that's computing, it is kind of being used as a programming assistant for students, or private tutoring system that the students are using to do the debugging of their programming exercises. And sometimes the students are generally using Gen AI in order to get a general outline or a general knowledge about a certain concept. where are educators in this entire landscape? Educators are generally trying to figure out how they can incorporate generative AI in their courses, from like how they should incorporate it in their syllabus, what should be different guardrails that they're putting in their course in order to control the students' usage of generative AI, while at the same time they're trying to figure out how they can optimize and automate a lot of different tasks that they have at hand in their course. And sometimes I've seen educators are using different AI tools for professional development, for content creation, and lots of different creative ways that AI is being used on the educator side as well. But let me start talking about like how educators can use AI systems or are using AI systems to optimize their experience as educators in this system. First and foremost, one thing that's really important for instructors, especially in very large courses, is administrative assistance. So where do students submit their homework assignments, how to check the compliance of the format of the homework submissions or project submissions that the students are making, and also how can we auto-grade different homework assignments depending on whether the homework assignment is a programming task, whether that's an essay, whether that's a math proof. So there's a lot of recent movement in terms of optimizing auto-grading systems so that it can provide partial credit, and it can also help grade different types of homework assignments that we're giving. There's also another layer of this administrative assistant, that's attendance taking. So a lot of different creative ways that we want to, first of all, engage the students in their learning, coming to the lecture, coming to the lab, going to the discussions, but at the same time having a way in order to measure students' attendance, but not only attendance, but also measuring their engagement in the course, so that we can identify students who are not engaged in the course and could be potentially at risk, so that we can reach out to them ahead of seeing the first failure that they have in the course. Educators also use Gen AI for lesson planning, for designing curriculum, for instructional materials. There are really successful examples of how lesson planning or curriculum planning is being done, and there are different systems that has automated that process for educators as well. And then lastly, I briefly mentioned about professional development, but professional development is for using Gen AI for having resource recommendation, and for also creating custom content. And custom content can be like, how do you improve your course? How do you create like videos, visuals, audio materials, or also different types of assessments for the course that can be customized for students and customized for the specific context of the course that the instructor is teaching. On the other hand, I feel like where I see Gen AI being more exciting is on the side of personalized learning for students. There are like two categories that I'm very excited about, and a lot of researchers are working in this direction. That's on building adaptive systems. What is an adaptive system? An adaptive system is a system that basically understands the student. So there's a concept of a student modeling, that you model a student's knowledge at any point in time. So you build the competencies for students, the knowledge components that they acquired, and the knowledge components that they might be missing at that specific point that might be hindering their ability to progress throughout the course later on. So you understand the student, there is a student model that then is going to basically be put on a pathway of learning along the goals of the course, and then along that way, along that pathway, students are building their skills as well. So some examples of this kind of work is the integration of different chatbots in different courses. Again, in computing discipline, there are a lot of good examples of how these adaptive systems and these chatbots are being used to provide feedback to students as they're working on homework assignments, or as they're engaged in discussion forums with the course staff, But at the same time, we are able to extract knowledge components from the students, build the student model, and then be able to adaptively navigate the student through their learning phase so that they acquire different competencies so that they can master different milestones in the course. So these chatbots, there's like a great example of Harvard CS50 bot. There is Copilot, GitHub Copilot that's being used by a lot of his students. There's Code Help, Promptly, and also Berkeley has built a bot for the programming course that we have, the first programming course, that's EECS 61A, that the students can basically code in the programming environment, and then they can also click on a button and get help. And then the help is going to be provided for students adaptively depending on where we think a student is at and how we can help a student navigate different issues or different missing knowledge components that they have in that stage of the programming task that they have. More importantly, a lot of time when we talk about personalized learning for our students, we need to have customized content for our students to make these adaptive systems to be more powerful. So what are different examples of customized content? So we can think about customized content in an example of creating curricular materials, that being assessment, that being work examples that we're providing to students so that they can learn content more coherently and like along the same pathway that the instructor wants, or like different randomized assessments. These assessments can be formative assessment or summative assessment, but depending on these randomized questions that are generated for the student, and we keep updating the student model, then we can also provide this customized questions that are going to come next, or these work examples that are coming next, so that the student can, again, gain the mastery of each one of these topics that they're working on. So when we are thinking about all of these new things that educators are building on and students have access to, or educators are building for students so that they have customized content with adaptive feedback for students, where do we see this transforming the student-teacher dynamic? What I see and what I hear from most of the educators is that I see that the roles are being redefined in education. I see that mostly teachers are being in facilitator role. So teachers are not directly instructing or directly supervising students during their learning, but they're mostly facilitating the learning process for students. And the students, on the other hand, are taking more active role in their learning. When I say students are taking more active role in their learning, one good example of that is that the tutoring landscape is changing. So when previously we have like one-on-one tutoring or group tutoring for students, now we're also seeing that there's a lot of specialized bots, especially if they have a student model and if they have adaptive system built in properly, and then it can be a better on-demand kind of tutoring system as opposed to like a scheduled one-on-one or group tutoring that we're offering in different courses. In addition to that, what I see as an exciting change is the communication, and the communication between the courses staff and students are being enhanced by different bots and different rack systems that are being built to respond to students' questions promptly and based on the content of the course and based on the historical questions that we see students have asked in certain courses. So these are all the things that I think are changing the landscape of teacher-student dynamic, and then how teachers and students at the same time are benefiting from the generative AI systems and tools that we have at hand. So the new kind of shift that we see in terms of the delivery of the courses, in terms of the teaching, is that now with all of the access that the students have to the different Gen AI tools, educators are moving a little bit away from traditional methods of lecture-based instruction with a standardized testing to different other alternative ways of the delivery of the materials, such as like flipped classroom, project-based learning, and all of these flipped classrooms and project-based learnings can be improved and can be facilitated by AI systems as well. If instructors are using just direct instruction using traditional methods, I still see that there's a lot of movement in terms of building active learning exercises in those classrooms that engage the students in their learning, so that as the instructor is teaching a certain concept, the instructor is able to identify what types of misconceptions exist in the class, how instructor can be notified of those misconceptions, so that it adaptively gives feedback to the instructor, so instructor can revise the teaching or go back and clarify a certain concept that they have been talking about in the course. There is also this kind of rather new concept of teaching through worked examples. So as opposed to flipped classroom, as opposed to direct instruction, one other way of teaching the students a certain concept or different course materials is walk them through different worked examples. So how to optimize a sequence of worked examples that can be put together so that a student can still gain the same mastery of the concept is an interesting research question, and is still something that's being worked on in the community. In terms of content creation, every content that we have in the courses, there's a lot of research on how we can automatically create these content or these curriculum kind of elements. So I talked about worked examples. So there is a lot of research on how to automatically generate worked examples based on the student model, based on the student competency at any level, but also contextualize worked example to match a student's background and a student preparation level, and so on and so forth. So these systems, as long as you put kind of the guidelines for the worked examples and the pathway, it can automatically generate these worked examples for students as well. I talked about assessments and how randomized assessments are very important. So for randomized assessments, there is also different ways of generating assessment questions automatically by Gen AI, and also be able to quantify the difficulty of these questions that are being generated, so that we can still have a standardized test that when you randomize one test versus another test, then on average, the difficulty level of those assessments can be comparable or could be similar to each other. The other interesting aspect is that with content creation, how do you create content so that the course is more engaging, so that the curriculum that we're delivering is more engaging? So this can be like multimedia presentation and different interactive simulations that can be incorporated into lecture slides or into the videos that we're creating for students, or also embedded active learning exercises that can be, again, automatically generated and automatically sent to students during lecture time as well. So with that being said, there's a lot of research that I said that like these are state-of-art research that educators are looking at or different tool developers are thinking about in order to advance AI education. But I also want to draw our attention into the ethical considerations of building and deploying these tools in classrooms. First and foremost, I think we all need to pay attention to data privacy. I've seen that some colleagues might have been developing different tools or might be deploying different commercial generative AI tools in their courses. But most of these tools, if we don't put enough guardrails for how students are interacting with them, or how students are informed about the integration of these courses with the course, violates FERPA regulation. So with the FERPA regulation, any interaction that the students have with the course, that be asking questions, that be like getting help for programming exercises or for homeworks, they have to have a reasonable assumption that they're interacting with the course staff. And none of that communication should be sent to a third party and should not be saved for any period of time on a third party server. So there's a lot of privacy concerns that we all need to think about that might be limiting our ability to use a lot of state-of-art Gen AI in education. Always these models come with biases. So how do we make sure that the biases that are inherent in all of these Gen AI tools are not also incorporated unintentionally into our courses and into the responses that we're providing to students. And the last thing that we are recently thinking about is that the cost factor and the training that's required for faculty and the institutional access to different infrastructure that's required to build and deploy different Gen AI tools in education will eventually widen the access gap for students. So looking at the long-term impact of some students and some institutions having access to Gen AI tools that are enhancing education, that are having all of these wonderful outcomes for students, and how some other students are not going to get access to that. This is something that we should, as a community, take a look at and evaluate it rigorously. So where do I think this AI education is heading next? And what are the new research questions in the community that it still needs to be answered and it still needs to be investigated? One main aspect that I'm interested in is advanced reinforcement learning by considering pedagogical constraints. So when we have all of these pre-trained or trained Gen AI models, how can we make sure that we're adapting these models using reinforcement learning so that it considers pedagogical constraints around education and is not using like open text in the vial? And how do we optimize for short-term and long-term learning outcomes? So we don't have any evaluation on the long-term effect of using Gen AI tools in education. So I think as a community, we should go back and take a look at what are the frameworks for us to evaluate the outcomes on a short-term basis, but also on a long-term basis. Obviously, the next thing that every time that there is an advancement in AI domain, there is always an interest in integrating that with virtual reality and augmented reality. So I'm interested in seeing how VR and AR can use different Gen AI tools in order to create lab simulation, hands-on learning, and different kinds of AI-enhanced materials for students and be able to incorporate VR and AR in education more closely. The next thing is that we are seeing a lot of students using GPT-4 and instructors are also deploying GPT-based kind of bots in different courses. But with the new kind of release of multimodal Gen AI systems and AI systems, it would be exciting to see how it can address other issues in education, such as, for example, being able to understand different types of languages, being able to respond to students in different languages, or be able to create audio and video and be able to take in audio and video and process that and generate a content for the course. Obviously, I would be interested in also understanding how the landscape of education is going to change as a whole. So how are we going to revise our syllabi? How are we going to revise our expectation of the students? What are the new competencies that we expect the students to know, as opposed to pre-Gen AI area that we were expecting the students to have, like mastery of a certain learning outcomes? What's going to be a new set of competencies that the students are going to take out of our classrooms? Again, I mentioned that I would be interested in learning about long-term impacts and short-term impacts. This is something that is still yet to understood or yet to be analyzed, but understanding this long-term effects and understanding the ethical and societal implications of using Gen AI in education is very interesting and should be an active research in the community. With that, thank you for listening. I'll hand it over to our next speaker.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Norouzi. And it's so lovely to see how much engagement is going on in the chat. It's great to see people's questions, dialogue, and just a reminder, we'll be going to these breakout rooms later on in today's workshop. So be sure to take that energy, go to one of the presenters' rooms with the facilitators, and they'll be able to continue those dialogues. But with that, I'd like to introduce our next presenter. We have Dr. Ibukun Osunbunmi, Assistant Research Professor at Pennsylvania State University. Sorry. So over to you, Dr. Osunbunmi.
Thank you. That was a great presentation from Narges. And welcome to part 2. We dive into it. Thank you for coming once again. So for Icebreaker, it's been some time talking. I just wanted to share a 6-word story on AI. This is one icebreaker I've been doing at the Leonard Center for a while. I'm still going to talk about myself. I'm going to talk about where I come from, what I do, all those things like that. But I just want to take a step back and let's have some time talking. So share a 6-word story on AI. So I'm going to say my own that could serve as a template for us, and then we could just drop our own in the chat box. Right. So my 6-word story on AI is AI sings the song of progress. AI sings the songs of progress. So that's my whole 6-word story on AI. So I wanted to drop in the chat what is your 6-word story on AI. By the way, the 6-word story I just told you was generated by AI. So just to know. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the Leonard Center. So I work in the Leonard Center as an assistant research professor and also as an assessment and instructional specialist. I'm going to talk more about that. But one thing I want you to know that Leonard Center is an endowed teaching and learning center in the College of Engineering at Penn State University. The center started in 1990 by the generous donation of Williams and Willis Leonard. We've also enjoyed other further $1 million worth of donations since then. And by this investment, we've been able to reinvest into faculty development, graduate student development, and pedagogy in the center. So primarily, we work with catalyzing and innovating teaching learning. More so that's why I'm here to talk about AI and assessment in the College of Learning. And these are all the first stuff that we do. I could take the next 1 hour talking about it all, but that's not the purpose for today. But this is who we are and what we have. At the center, we call ourselves the unicorn because we bring on board different expertise in order to enhance engineering education in Penn State University. Dr. Sirazab is the assistant dean for the College of Engineering, who also is the director of the center. And Dr. Stephanie Cutler, too, is the director of the assessment and instruction support. Both of them, they're going to be co-facilitating the breakout session with me. And then this is who I am, and this is what we have. We bring in various expertise, as you have seen in just a moment from that picture. And then we all work together to enhance engineering education. That being said, so let me talk about myself. So this is me. This is my family. You may guess, this is my pretty daughter. She turned 2 in March. And that's my wife. She's also here listening to us. Thank you for all the support. She's in her 4th year of PhD studies. And then, like I said, I work as an assistant professor here at Penn State University and also an assessment and regional support for the center. By extension, I help with the College of Engineering together. So workshop is my thing, assessment is my thing. I collaborate a lot on engineering education research and right granting. We also have the formal pedagogical training of engineering technical assistants. So you cannot lead an instructional hour in the College of Engineering without undergoing a formal training in Penn State. So, and that's part of the things I do through the center. For personal research, that's what I do. I work with faculty development, technology enhanced learning. That's also has to do with AI, VHAL, and the likes of it. I work on assessments. We do fund projects. Like I said, we reinvest the endowment fund into project that talks about innovation in the classroom. I do get to assess that. I do get to assess NSF project and all the likes of them. And these are all the fun stuff that I do at the center. So that's been said about me. Yes, so also for today's workshop, before we go for today's workshop, can we just have a readout of what people are saying about their 5-word story? Do we have?
I think one of my favorites was "You are terrifying, please go away," mixed with "AI changed my life tremendously," and oh, there was one, "Artificial but not yet intelligent yet." Those were some of my favorites, but there are a lot of really good ones. The ones generated by AI, Ibukun talked about, and I talked about this earlier, are really creepy. Like code whispered, machines dreamed of life. They get a little creepy when AI generates their own. So thanks for sharing, everybody.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Stephanie, on that. So for today's workshop, what I was hoping that these workshops going to be a little bit hands-on, and I'm hoping that for some of us who have not used AI before to help with our teaching and learning, this is going to be your initiation point. For those who have used it, I hope that you will be able to take 1 or 2 ideas that they could creatively implement in your classroom. So one of my first objectives here is to look at, let's discuss university design of learning. What is it in a brief? What does it entail and what do I mean? And then we'll be looking into how do we use generative artificial intelligence in order to achieve higher levels of Bloom taxonomy in our classroom. And then we would look at how can we foster inclusive course experience using GI and UDL. And that's the taxon that I have on hand right now. And we're going to really do it, and we're going to do it amazingly. So it's good hands-on, there's going to be back and forth conversation. And these are the objective for today's workshop. So I would like to start off by saying that a lot of time I've realized that when we design in our classroom, we actually design for the average student that's going to come to class. So when we design for classroom, we say, okay, I'm going to make my course experience, I want to facilitate the course for the average student. But unfortunately, the average student hardly exists. So it's end up that we really don't design for anybody. We really don't maximize people's learning. So what UDL recommends, and they have a website that you could go in and check in and just read up on your own. But I'll be talking and I'll pull in things from there. The UDL website, it's cast.org, things like that. It's also on my research page. But I'm just digesting and thinking through my experience, helping with faculty development and things like that. Is saying that as an instructor, you need to step back a little and really think about what are the kind of students that will come to my classroom. Some are going to be academically challenged, not necessarily because they're not good. It could be because they're facing family challenges or some behavioral pattern in your classroom. Some are going to be high achieving. Some are going to be first English speakers. Others are not going to be first English speakers as a language. We have people who come to your classroom who are driven by personal goals. Others are community driven. People are going to come to your classroom with all kinds of identity, sexual identity, racial identity, and sexual orientation and gender orientation. We need to begin to step back. So UDL says, look, don't be reactive with the way you design your classroom. Step back and think about all these kind of students that are going to come to a classroom, and be deliberate to design your classroom in such a way that it will foster inclusive teaching and it's going to enhance the learning. Of course, it may not be possible that you cover everybody eventually, but to a very much extent, if we're that deliberate, we'll be able to make so much progress with our learning in our classroom. And such an approach is not just going to take care of every kind of process that's going to come to your classroom. It's actually beneficial to individual student that is going to come in. That being said, there are actually three networks when it comes to Universal Design of Learning principle. We have the affective network, we have the recognition network, and the strategic network. When you think about the affective network, one of the answers that we want to answer, that students who want to answer, is why is this learning in my class very important? A lot of times faculty just come into the class and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And we get into the calculus and we just begin to say the host. And sometimes, so students are just there in the classroom, they don't know what's the purpose. Why am I doing this? How does this relate to my career? How does this relate to what I want to become? What does this has to do becoming an engineer? And how does this fit in the whole landscape of things? So the way of learning must be answered for that course. It must be answered. And also the what of learning. And when we talk about the what of learning, we're talking about the representation network. And what we mean by a representation network, we're saying that as a faculty, we must begin to think about how do I present my material in different ways so that I can cater to the different needs of student that is going to walk into my classroom. And the good thing about that is, as you begin to look into different ways to present the material to different categories of people that will come to a classroom, it's not just going to be beneficial to all of the students. Actually, research has shown us in cognitive science that when you introduce materials to students in different contexts, you are going to be having deep learning. You are going to be having people understanding the materials better, and students will be able to do what we call the lateral and the figural transfer. They'll be able to transfer the learning in context. And then we have the strategic network, the how of learning. You want to provide the opportunity for students to be able to demonstrate how best they have learned in your classroom. Sometimes there's not one way to demonstrate ability. So the how of learning is most often talking about, how do I present multiple opportunity for students to actually demonstrate the learning in my classroom. So that being said, one of the good things, and before we go into this one, is that generative artificial intelligence comes in very handy to implement universal design of learning principle to facilitate inclusive course experience. And I'm going to demonstrate to us. I'm not just going to talk through today. I will be able to demonstrate to us how we could do that as we go on. But before we do that, I just want to ask us a question like, think about your coursework. Think about a topic in that course. And I want you to drop in the chat. What kind of topic would you want generative artificial intelligence to help you in developing the course material? Maybe in developing an assignment, in developing a course material, or in generating multiple problems or multiple case study that you can use in your classroom. I want us to drop that in our chat, and then let's go from there. I will take a pause a minute so that people could begin to respond to that. Yeah, I see ethics and engineering. I see fluid mechanics. Can you just, keep it coming, let it keep coming. Making sustainability, all right. Effective discussion and programming concept. Stoichiochemistry, I love that. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to pick one of those things, and then we're going to talk about it as we go on. But let it keep coming, and let's see how we could, probably by exemplifying and demonstrating, one, we could adapt that to our classroom environment. So one of the things we'll say when it comes to generative artificial intelligence is that the quality of the output, the quality of the case study that you will have when you interact with this tool, it's going to be very much dependent on how you frame your prompt. And with my using generative artificial intelligence, holding workshops here and there, and reading up articles and attending a lot of webinars, I just came to realize that these are the things that will help us. You must first have a desired response, something you want to investigate. And that is what we are doing here. And that's why we're dropping in our chat. And then you must begin to think about, what's my class size? What's my class demography? What level of Bloom taxonomy do I want to achieve? HHW, it's abbreviation of health, happiness, and well-being of the society. The National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine tells us that when we do adapt our class content to health, happiness, and well-being of the society, we discover that the achievement gap reduces, and then we're able to, student performance increases. So you must be thinking about, how do I adapt this content? How do I contextualize this abstract concept or whatever you're doing to really see how it benefits the society? You must be thinking of, do I want people to work in teams? And then how do I want students to use the AI to solve their problem or not? I'm going to pick one of the things that we saw here. And there is one I saw, ethics in engineering. Let's call it ethics in construction engineering. We're going to do that. And you give me 1 minute, we'll be on ChatGPT right away. You could use ChatGPT, you could use Copilot, and all kinds are available there. So this is me going to ChatGPT website just to show us, just to demonstrate to us. A lot of us, we really want to see it done for us, and let's go for it. Okay, so if you look at what I just said down, somebody said ethics in construction engineering. So one of the things we're going to say, tell ChatGPT is this, like, look, develop 3 case scenarios for ethics in construction engineering. If you remember, part of the things that I talked about was you need to give the context. So I need to ask that person, what's your what level are you teaching? Is it first-year student, second-year student, or fourth-year student? Or maybe let me just make that assumption that you're teaching. Is the person there, or maybe I should just make an assumption for the person?
Let's say they were junior level engineering students, so third-year students.
Oh, that means you're providing context. Okay. Do you want them to work in teams?
Sure.
Awesome. Good. What's the class size like?
It's big class, 150 students.
150 students. Thank you. So you must have a prompt in mind, and then provided the context and constraint will help you generate a very good study. So I would say develop 3 case studies, three case scenarios for ethics in construction engineering for a junior level engineering course. I want them to work in teams. I teach a 150 class size. So before you know it, in less than 5 minutes, ChatGPT is going to give you some case studies that you can use. The good thing about this is, from this 3 case study, you could tell it to do 3, you could tell it to do 4, tell it to do 5. The good thing is you could actually decide to select which one you like or which one you prefer. Or the good thing is, like we're talking about giving autonomy to students, you could present the whole 3 to your student and say, choose the one you want. But maybe as an instructor, I came in and I saw that, oh, it's just a paragraph and it's not detailed enough. I could actually tell ChatGPT to say, I want a 3-paragraph write-up, for the above case study. I understand that National Academy of Science and Engineering and Medicine tells me that if I adapt it to health, well-being, and happiness of the people, people are able to learn more. I can say adapt this to health, happiness, and well-being of this society. I can even go further to say, develop for me a class activity for these case scenarios. And then here we go. And then you discover that this time around, you're going to have a more detailed case study, but it really depends on how much you want to spend on that case study in the classroom. And then discover that it's going to be more realistic, it's going to be a little bit more authentic, and then a lot of awesome things are happening here. Probably if we have more of the time, we're going to discuss more on that when we get to the breakout group discussion. But I just hope you begin to see how we can use this thing in our classroom and it can really help us. Moving forward, I talked about, this is where we're going to do more of the talking. I talked about, trying to bring in UDL and GAI. I'm going to give us an overview here, and hopefully we'll be able to have more time for demonstration when we get to the breakout session. But just to talk about, we've been presented today that UDL is very important in enhancing student learning. How could I achieve that with generative artificial intelligence? The way of learning that I talked about, it's important that we provide multiple means of engagement, because it's going to help us make students purposeful and motivated. For example, when you look at the UDL guidelines from their website, you discover that they talked about optimizing individual choice and autonomy. Like I said the other time, you could use a GAI to say, develop multiple case studies, and then you could allow your student to pick from it. In a way, you are beginning to incorporate generative artificial intelligence to it, because one of the questions that a lot of faculty is even saying, okay, this generative artificial intelligence that has come, how do I even go about it? How do I leverage it? So you could develop all those different, scenarios and they're put in your classroom. UDL says that build by fostering collaboration and community. One of the things you could say, okay, you've developed like 3 or 4 case scenarios. You could tell students to choose whichever they want. And then you tell the student to go into groups. And one of the things you could tell the student is get yourself into a group of 5, and then generative artificial intelligence is going to be the 6th member of the group. So what you are trying to do is you are trying to de-emphasize generative artificial intelligence as the master piece that gives them the solution. It's just a tool to work with in brainstorming. So you could put them in brainstorming, let the GAI become a brainstorming partner and let them work that solution, that problem that you give to them in the classroom. UDL says that, we need to internalize what students learn by helping them to check for how do they, develop self-assessment and reflection. One of the things that you would need to do in your classroom and incorporating GAI into your classroom is just tell the student, like, okay, now that you've worked with GAI to solve this problem, I want you to talk about what are the strengths that you notice? What are the weaknesses that you notice? How can you use GAI to actually enhance your learning going forward? And how do you mitigate? How do you work around, the weaknesses, the shortcoming of GAI? When you're doing, there are 2 things you're doing. You are making them to self-reflect on their learning, which has been shown to be very important. And then you are making them to see that GAI is not infallible. It has its weaknesses. And, in having conversation with industry partners, this is one of the things that industry are saying, that we really want students who can work with generative artificial intelligence, who can troubleshoot when generative artificial intelligence is making a mistake and correct it, who understand the strength of generative artificial intelligence and they can leverage it even for the progress of the company. And by the time you're doing this, you are winning those 2 goals, deepening the learning by self-reflection, by metacognition, and then preparing them to be able to begin to engage with those tools that will prepare them for the workforce later in the future. The next thing we'll talk about is, then how can I use generative artificial intelligence to answer the what of learning? How do I use it, in order to provide multiple means of representation in my classroom? You could use generative artificial intelligence to develop charts, develop visuals. That could be an alternative for auditory information. Another thing you could use to do is you could use it to promote understanding across different languages. You could tell students in your classroom, perhaps those who are not first English speakers in the class, and say, look, if you want to read in a language, you're permitted to put this material in generative artificial intelligence, and then it can spill out the content of this classroom in your language. You can also use it for open educational resources. Maybe you have some resources and you want people to, maybe you are traveling to Africa or you are traveling to another part of the world, and you don't have the ability to translate your course material or your workshop, wherever, you could tell artificial intelligence to actually do that for you. Let's take, for example, let me just use that. Let's take, for example, I speak Yoruba language as a mother tongue. And then let's say that I want to go to some interior part of Africa. It's being spoken, the language is spoken about 40 million people in the world. And I really want to begin to create content. I looked online and I see that there are not so much content in my language online. And as a professor, I want to make, those educational resources available for my people in their home mother tongue, not in English language. I could just say to ChatGPT, is my screen being shared? Are you seeing my screen?
Yes. Yep.
What are you seeing right now?
The ChatGPT.
Awesome. I could just tell ChatGPT, and it could be any language. Translate the above case studies to Yoruba language. Then it's just going to do it in less than 5 minutes. So if you are really interested in providing, open educational resources online in various languages, you can, of course, I've used this ChatGPT to interpret, to look at, English, content in English and Yoruba language, and to a very large extent is 95% accurate. Of course, whether it is this translation you are looking into or the case study you are looking into, generative artificial intelligence is not the master. You are still the master, it's the tool. You will still need to go back inside, check for the biases, check for the ethical considerations, check for alignment, check for fine-tuning. Still go back inside and look into, does this align with what I really want my children to do? So it's not going to give it all out to you and then you are carrying it. No, it's just a tool to help you get the work easier. And, as an idea generation and brainstorming tool. You can also use it to maximize and transfer learning. You could use GI to present problems in different contexts. It helps metacognition of students. You could use GI to provide explicit and supported opportunities to generate learning to new situation. The second to last thing I'll be talking about today is, GI can be leveraged to actually answer the how of learning, the strategic network. Like I said, there's more to that, but primarily in strategic network is you want to be able to give students ability to demonstrate their knowledge in different ways. And one of the things UDL tells us is if you're designing for accessibility, one of the checkpoints that you want to use is to optimize access to tools and assistive technologies, which means that you must make sure that the GI tools you're using in your classroom is accessible to all students. It can be used by people with disabilities, and it should be free. Don't give students an assignment and tell them to use the paid version of GI. It's going to disadvantage some set of students in that classroom who do not have the money to buy it. Another thing you could do is you could use as a multiple means of communication. You could use GI to solve problems in different ways. You can also tell students to decide to use any media, any tool, any GI tool that they want to use in the classroom to attempt a problem, but they will have to tell you what tool did they use. What part of the work did the GI tool, do? What was the part that GI was instrumental for? How did they collaborate with it? How did they analyze the outcome to make sure that what they actually have is the correct thing? Did they do the evaluation? Did they do the analysis? What did they use the GI to create? When you're looking at those evaluation, analysis, creation, these are very high level, Bloom taxonomy, that you're trying to achieve. And that's part of the project that you submitted to NSF on GI, on use of GI College of Engineering. One of the things we looked into was how can we take all these lower level course of Bloom taxonomy, how can we use GI to move them to a higher level of Bloom taxonomy? And we submitted, an NSF grant for that, and hopefully it's going to come out funded. Another thing you want to do is you may want to use generative artificial intelligence to support planning and development. In the breakout room, I'm going to be showing us how you can use generative artificial intelligence to actually develop maybe like charts, like 1 year plan, 1 month plan, 2 month plan, maybe on a term paper or a project that you want students to do. You can allow students to do that, let them individualize it, and then let them submit it to you. My final words on ChatGPT, and it could be ChatGPT, it could be Copilot or wherever that is coming up. A lot of them is this. Number one, I want you to assume that this is the worst AI you will ever use. Because I see that sometimes when ChatGPT first came out and some of these generative artificial intelligence, a lot of faculty said, no, it's nonsense. It's saying rubbish. It's not citing well. And because of that, they left it. But the truth is, the GI in 2023 is not the GI in 2024. So just know that this is the worst version that you ever work with, and it's not going to end there. The second thing I would say is be the human on the loop. Be the person that is giving the AI the fine-tuning that it needs, the alignment that it needs, putting the ethical boundaries, removing the bias. Be the human on the loop. AI is not the master chef. It's not the one that knows it all. It's just one of those chefs that can help you. You are the master chef. So be the one to make that crucial decision as a faculty as to how this AI is going to move. The top one is saying treat AI like a person. Research has shown us that when you treat AI as a person, take for example the case study we're talking about. If you tell AI that, look, AI, I'm an instructor in this course. I want you to develop for me case study in this. It has shown that it develops more quality results than just saying develop a case study. So interact with it like a person. I'm not making AI into the person, but this is going to help. And lastly, always invite AI to the table. Generative artificial intelligence has come to stay. So the more good people, the more good faculty are getting into the space, playing around it, the more we can begin to know what it looks like. Innovations come by trial and error. No one can truly use generative artificial intelligence to enhance the topic, your course, like you. Interact with it. You don't have to go all the way in. Little by little, begin to play around with it. And before you know it, you become an expert. You will know the boundaries and you will know how you are going to use it. I hope you've learned one or two things and you've been able to think about one or two things as generative artificial intelligence in your classroom and how that ties to UD Health. I want to thank you for listening. And these are the resources I want to show to us. And these 4 final words that I said, they're actually the words of Ethan Molik. His book is Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI. I want to recommend each and every one of us to read the book. So this exactly are not my word. This was one of these words I was saying, when I was talking about it in this book. Thank you so much for listening. And this is it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Osunbunmi. And with that, sure I have my right information. We are going to transition to the breakout sessions for Q&A and further discussions. It seems like there's going to be some lively sessions based on all the conversations that keep going in chat, which is fantastic to see. I'm so glad y'all are enjoying the session. Breakout rooms are self-assigned and are organized by speaker, and each speaker has brought along some facilitators to help with discussion. So with Dr. Norouzi is Rose Minusha, and with Dr. Osunbunmi is Sarah Zapp and Stephanie Cutler. I'm going to ask my colleague Thomas to go ahead and open the breakout rooms now. So you should see a pop-up on your screen allowing you to select a breakout room. If you don't see that pop-up, navigate to the bottom of your screen and select the breakout rooms button and click the room you'd like to enter. If you're running an older version of Zoom, if you don't see the breakout room button, or if you just nothing's popping up, please post in the chat which speaker's room you'd like to enter, and we can assign you to that room. And we'll call everyone back to the larger group around 3:25 Eastern time to get some final remarks to hear what y'all have been talking about. So with that, have a wonderful discussion. See you all in a bit. Yeah, looks like everyone's found their way back. So I'm just Hope everyone had a lovely discussion. There were some good conversations. We were able to pop in and out, and it seemed like everything was going smoothly. And I was hoping our speakers and facilitators could share a quick 1 minute or maybe a little bit longer recap of what their group discussed. So I'm wondering if Dr. Norouzi and Rose, if we can start with your group, any highlights or insights you all want to share?
Yeah, sure. We can share some questions that popped up. A lot of the questions in our group were mostly about the ethical considerations of AI. I think for educators, it's really it's such a concern. We want to use these systems, but how can educators be responsible in using AI systems? And yeah, and I guess if you want to share some of your suggestions for the ethical considerations, specifically the student privacy aspect of it.
Yeah, I don't know if we have time to talk about that, but there is, we talked a little bit about FERPA regulation. How can we make sure that we're not violating FERPA? We're also, what's the benefit of using open models versus commercial models in terms of navigating security and FERPA regulations as well. We talked also a little bit about the how to detect whether some student submission are ChatGPT or Gen AI generated or not, different research that's being done. We also briefly talked about how Gen AI is being integrated in online learning. So what are different research that has been done on optimizing the experience of online learners, because one thing that research has also shown is that we get most of the diversity and improving equity through online learning, because we have diverse set of online learners who are taking online courses to get AI education or different sorts of STEM education that everyone is really passionate about. So what are different ways that we can engage online audience more and provide support to online audience? We talked a little bit about that as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Ibukun, Stephanie, Sarah, anything you want to share from your group?
Our group did a lot of talking about how to use AI in the classroom and some of the different challenges and concerns that folks had around that, such as like knowing when students are using AI and helping to encourage them, and talking about why it's important to like explain when to use AI to your students, like when you want them to do the work themselves versus when they can use AI for tasks. And then we also talked about kind of, it's a spiral though, because if you have students like look at an AI output and like make comments on it, they could use a different AI to make comments on it, and then they could use it, and it's a spiral out of control. And so trying to kind of think through some of those challenges as we all sort of figure out and navigate this landscape. So, but there's a lot of different things, but I feel like that we ended up kind of cycling around some of those like challenges of really identifying when students are using AI and how to encourage them to and to not use AI in different situations.
Amazing. Thank you. Anything either one of you else want to add?
I think one of the interesting things is, I think overall there's this kind of overriding question about where this is going and what impact it's going to have on student learning, and the concern that, you know, it will become very hard to detect whether it's a person or AI writing something. The idea of it becoming very human-like, and you know, I think from the Leonard Center perspective, we do feel like it's the Wild West right now, and we know it's here. And so from the Leonard Center perspective, it's like, well, we have to figure out how to use it. So that's kind of the approach we've taken, is we're doing some internal funding, for example, to not necessarily prevent the use of AI, which is, you know, a lot of people are concerned about it, but we want to figure out how to use it in a way to support student learning. And I don't think anybody has the complete answer to that yet, because it's so changing so rapidly and we're figuring it out, but the potential is there. And, you know, I think if we have this workshop a year from now or 5 years from now, it's going to be totally different, and it'll be kind of fascinating to see what happens.
I agree. I think I mean, that sounds interesting to me. Come back, same topic, but where's the conversation now? Well, amazing. Thank both breakout rooms for sharing some highlights and conversations. And I know we're reaching the end of our time, so I just want to do some final remarks. So with that, I'd like to thank our speakers and facilitators, the rest of the AAAS IU's team, and all of you who are able to join and participate in the workshop today. It was a really, really wonderful time. So I appreciate all the knowledge that was shared and all the engagement that was given. We do have a survey link, which we are posting in the chat and sending via email. The survey should only take a few minutes. We really appreciate your feedback. It's surveys and responses like that that brought this type of conversation out today. So we really do look at those responses and see what y'all have to say. And additionally, as mentioned, a recording of the presentation will be posted on our website, emailed to you in the coming days. The slide deck is already available on AAA's IU's website, so you can go through and look at the resources that were shared, any highlights. And with that, thank you all for joining us today, and we hope we'll see you later in the year when our virtual workshop series kicks off again in August. That will be our fall portion. This was the spring. We're going to take a break for the summer. I hope other people have some lovely trips planned. I hope the weather's nice where you are. And we look forward to continuing to engaging and learning with y'all, our AAAS IU's community. Thanks y'all so much, and have a happy Wednesday.